Well, the new materialism is not the old reductionistic, atomistic materialism. It's about energy transformation. So being is energy transformation. And the thing about energy is that in our world today, we're dealing with scarcity of energy, and we're running into scarcity of resources, limits of natural resources, oil, coal, natural gas, fossil fuels, but also precious metals, arable land, obviously atmospheric ability to absorb emissions. And so we need to think differently about energy, because in some ways it's finite and scarce in terms of the way that we live our lives. In some ways it's actually infinite because energy is conserved. We need to think beyond the sort of simple opposition between matter and spirit, because energy is both at once at the same time. And again, it's about the energy conversion. We need to think about how to make do with less material things, but how to affirm and understand and open up to a kind of a plenitude, an inexhaustible plenitude of energy in terms of being, in terms of thought, in terms of theology. And we need to refashion that and rework that into our politics to see how energy is at work in terms of money, in terms of finance capitalism, in terms of food shortages, labor, strikes, how we live, how we think, how we eat, how we breathe, what we do with our lives and our existences. And so religion is a form of life. It's a form of life that we all share in various ways, in different ways. But theology ultimately, essentially, is energy. And we need to be able to think on the earth. And so we need to think about the earth in a real theological ecology that's not just a kind of romanticism, but seriously think about the earth beyond the sort of superficial globalization in which it's not a simple death. There's multiple deaths of God. But I like Derrida's quote where he says the God by him goes by other names so that he rightly passes for an atheist. So I would say that I pass for a Methodist sometimes, right? So and it helps being in Conway, Arkansas sometimes as well. So I was thinking about the line from Elvis Costello, what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? And so in some ways it is funny because of the way that it's so vacuous and so banal, and so it's like a bad repetition. Every Christmas where we sing the same hymns and we have the same stories and we celebrate the nativity and the birth of Christ, and we know from biblical scholarship that it didn't happen. It didn't happen that way, right? Nobody knew. Nobody was there at Jesus' birth, and so it's all set up in retrospect. But it's the same with his death, right? We know that he was born when we know that he died, but we don't know the circumstances, but we have this story as if we were there and eyewitnesses to the birth and the death, and yet both that birth and that death, and Lacan says that we live our lives between two deaths. So birth is a kind of death, right? Death is a kind of death of death, and then that has just retroactively just shoots its energy across millennia, and so we're still living in some ways the after effect, Freud's Nachtraglichkeit, the after effect of that birth, and then that death, which is a repetition of that birth, which is already a kind of death, which is the death of God, which is the death of all of us, which is the Advent, which is what we live and die. It's just, there's no big other. There's no big guy with white hair and a beard that's sitting around upstairs pulling the strings, right? So that's the first sort of death of God, is the imagination of God as a being and as a person, as someone or something separate from the world. And so everything that we think about God, we need to sort of rethink in terms of where we live in the universe, the world, the reality, the situation in which we live our lives. But that doesn't mean those kinds of hopes, those kind of dreams, those kind of cherished moments and qualities don't disappear, right? It's not like we live in some sort of atheistic vacuum of nihilism and despair. We still live our lives. We still have the same hopes and dreams, but they're also fraught with ambivalence, ambiguity, mourning, love, pain, loss, grief, that you don't have one without the other. And so in a sense, the death of God is also while it's the death of some kind of transcendent God way up there, out there, it's also the death that's a part of life, and you don't have death without life. You don't have resurrection without death. We're always dying every single day, even before we ultimately die at the end of our lives. Relationships die, experiences die, encounters die, but they have to in order for us to have meaningful encounters to come.